I've been doing unique intros for, places, other countries, different accents, different languages. So I'm going to go full Toronto Canadian here and say, hello, this is David Goss and Tom Bogert at SoccerWise. It is time for us to talk about Toronto FC here, the six, baby. And it is another probably tough year that we are heading into. Tom, to me, Toronto FC are one of the seminal moments in MLS history. And I know as you go back through it, and we're going to do more of this at SoccerWise, you talk about sort of these benchmarks, DC United at the beginning, Chicago Fire coming into this league. I think Philadelphia Union's entrance into the league right ahead, and then Seattle. That's considered like MLS 2.0 or 3.0, whichever one you want to go with. And then there's a whole, set of expansion and SKC's rebrand into their new stadium. But to me, Giovinco and the MLS Cup runs and the atmospheres in Toronto and the setup and all of that, that to me is one of those big benchmark moments. And it was a big one for my life because it was the first time I was really in a market that was fully committed to Major League Soccer, and the team was super relevant, and it was a big deal, and it felt like, oh, okay, this league has made it and established themselves. And they were there for a while. They were there for 5 or 6 years. Since they've taken the step back, it has just continued to go downhill. And I think, Tom, that's one of the frustrating things for me from the outside watching this is like, the potential, and you want it to be there.
Yeah, and after the Giovinco era, they got caught trying short-term fixes, little Band-Aids on structural issues, and there was a drain in the front office of a lot of really good executives that started with Tim Bezbatchenko that left, and I could name probably 7 other people off the top of my head. We'll just leave it at that. And
you could name 3 CSOs right now, right? In Issa Tall and Corey Ray in Major League Soccer, who came out of that, and I believe in Portland, right?
Jackson Dodd is I think the number 2 to Ned Grabavoy, so
and that doesn't include Tim Bezbatchenko, who's now running like 5 teams around the world, including a Premier League club.
And again, so all these people were in the front office, and then it became, let's look on transfer market. Who's the free agents that are coming up? Who does my son like in FIFA? All of these things. And that's what led them to where they are today. Like the amount of coaches they've cycled through since Greg Vanney left. Greg Vanney wanted more control. He wasn't given it, so he went to Galaxy where he got the control and everything else. Well, Greg Vanney just won MLS Cup with the LA Galaxy. The front office, thankfully, has been remade. This is being led by GM Jason Hernandez, and he's putting together his own staff that is supposed to tackle this. Anytime that he's done media opportunities, he's stressed we can't take shortcuts or we're going to end up in the same spot. Yeah. They've needed to take their lumps. Last season was supposed to be the start of a new era, but the head coach was hired by the predecessor in the front office, and then there was a drone scandal, and now the head coach left. So Robin Fraser's in as head coach, and Jason. I think that if they give this coach and this front office time and a little bit of leeway, that it might suck for one more year. And then you can kind of put the expectations and pressures on again. I'm not dooming them to definitely be one of the worst teams in the league, but just looking at it right now, that's where most people have them. But what matters most is that they don't go, oh, crap, we should fix it right now. Who can we sign to a long-term contract, short-sighted, that's going to mess up the progress? So what they've done is rebuilt their assets, whether it's allocation money, letting some contracts go. They tried really hard to get out of Lorenzo Insigne, but Lorenzo Insigne turned down multiple offers that would have included a buyout that would have given him most of his money. Insigne's still on the team. Bernadeschi was reborn last year. Long may it continue, and we'll see which hair he shows up with on day one. I'm very curious to see that more so than anything else. But this team, again, it might suck. It might be difficult. It might be hard, but they are on the right path.
Well, we already went through the second Matrix movie, I think, with Bernadeschi's hair. So we're just on the third one. If you want to go watch that movie, you can get your preview.
No spoilers.
No
spoilers for his hair.
Yeah, no spoilers. It's tough to reset things. I think the Robin Fraser appointment is interesting, right? It's an ode to the success, but for a guy who then left and has worked outside of Toronto in Major League Soccer, had up and down success, has ideas. And so it feels like, okay, can this be the continuation of what it should have been in 2020? Like 2020 or 2021, when you post Greg Vanney, post Giovinco, post Josie and Bradley should have just taken that next step into your future. This feels like it kind of could be that with a gap in between. And I think fans would be okay with that if it finally starts and moves forward. We've seen the fans sort of leave the stadium like there is I think, a real worry for this club, and they're about to expand it because they are going to be one of the hosts for the 2026 World Cup, and they're going to add 10,000 seats or whatever it is to this stadium. And those conversations were about doing it permanently because Toronto was going to be this game changer in Major League Soccer, and they have the ability, right? It's an international city. It's a place that people from all around the world are happy to come live because they can feel comfortable. They can find connection. Like, Javinko had never left Italy before. Now he's trying to talk himself into short-term TFC contracts on the back end of his deal because he's happy in that place. And I think that's the potential. It doesn't just have to be Italians, by the way. Like, let's throw that out there. You don't just have to do the same playbook, but it's what Toronto Raptors have tried to do with the international contingent of players they've signed in the past, and the stars that they've sort of leaned towards. And I think the potential should exist there as well. And I'm hoping, because I absolutely love going to Toronto, flying into Billy Bishop, walking over under the river, getting into the city. Like, that is one of my favorite things to do in the world. When this stadium's bumping, it is special. When this team is good, it is special. And look at the Canadian men's national team. It is all Toronto natives who didn't play for TFC. The talent is there, the potential is there, and we're hoping that it all comes on board. So let's go to our conversation now with Michael Singh of Toronto Till I Die, who covers the team a little bit closer than us. All right, well, I've already given my Billy Bishop spiel, so there's nothing else Toronto that I need to talk about besides TFC. So therefore, we had to chat with an expert, Michael Singh, in market, one of the hosts of Toronto Till I Die podcast. If you don't listen, you should. It has been a lot of the die part for Toronto FC fans over the last few years. We will talk about all of it in just a moment. But Michael, nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you as well, man. Happy to hop on here and chat some some TFC.
The excitement, unbridled, is what some would say. Season's around the corner. You're not feeling it? It doesn't feel like 2019 or 2017?
Not at all. I mean, look, we'll get into it a little bit more, but like the biggest thing for this off season was supposed to be a turning of the page for Toronto FC, a new era. You know, let's put the past behind us. Let's move forward, and it really feels a lot of the same. There hasn't been enough change for Toronto FC fans, in my opinion. So it's tough to get optimistic, but I'm sure TFC fans will show up and try to give their best smile right down by Billy Bishop, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's a great atmosphere. It's a great spot to watch a game when the weather is okay. So it might take a couple weeks for that as well. As we do on all of these, we will go through our transfer offseason update. We'll talk about some of the big storylines. We'll have our Doyleism as well coming up on the great Sage's thoughts on the team, which we will react to. And then we've got our over-underline to finish with from Andrew Wiebe. For transfer updates, it was an odd window. The page has not turned the way you said. So let's start off the field, because maybe the biggest storyline that actually happened is the change in head coach. After the CSO change and all the change in the front office over the last year, John Herdman stepped away. We don't know 100% why. It feels slightly connected to the drone scandal that occurred with the Canadian women's national team that he used to be in charge of, which is being investigated currently. So he stepped away. And in replacement is, I guess you could say, one of your own, in Robin Fraser. He's not a Toronto native, but he was a big part of the Greg Vanney Toronto years. He is someone who himself connects very heavily with the city of Toronto. What do you make of what this sort of move has been like, and how the club sort of went through this?
Yeah, I think the last part you hit on was very important, was that, you know, Robin Fraser was a big part of that 2017 Toronto FC team. The people that were part of that run, and even in the years leading up to that 2016 or 2017 MLS Cup, were people who built an affinity with Toronto FC, and playing for Toronto FC, putting that crest on your jersey, it meant something. And over the last, several years, it's lost that. It's lost that. I mean, the buzzword is culture, people always say. Former TFC president Bill Manning used to say it all the time. Toronto FC lost its culture. We got to get it back. Well, insert Robin Fraser, a guy who knows Toronto FC. And I think the biggest part for this move was, it made sense in a lot of different ways. It's Toronto FC's fifth different head coach since Greg Vanney departed the club ahead of the 2021 season. If you count interns as well, it's been a lot of turnover from a coaching staff perspective. And, one of it is, okay, yes, they're looking for more stability in that position moving forward, But also, I mean, it's not cheap to go fire,
Yeah.
Bob Bradley, one of the winningest coaches in MLS history, and then have to, we don't know what the financial implications are of John Herdman, but his 1 year tenure here at Toronto is no longer. And if TFC are, still paying some of that, again, it it costs money for that to happen. So enter Robin Fraser, who, checks a box, and the fact that he loves Toronto is, built from the cut from the same cloth as Greg Vanney, who was the last coach to have serious success at Toronto FC. And financially, it's not the most expensive move as well. So he's a guy who can come in and hopefully provide some of that stability while you're not, spending too much on him.
Yeah, there's a lot, yeah, as you said, there's a lot of parts of this that make a ton of sense. His connection, I just still remember we interviewed him, I think, heading into the bubble in 2020 as head coach of the Colorado Rapids. And I think I asked him, like, what do you think you're going to do when you're not having games? And he's like, I'll just hang out with my Toronto buddies. And it's like, you're a head coach of a different team? Maybe that should be the first answer. And so he has still been connected. And I'm sure you have seen him in Toronto when he's been off a ton of time. He loves the city. He loves what it means. And I think he was a big part of the belief that the club could be something bigger. And we talked about it in the segment coming into this. Like, to me, that 2015 through run, Toronto FC represented something that I wasn't 100% sure was possible, of like being market relevant, being a borderline, global club in an MLS structure. And I think Robin Fraser, the belief that that was possible and seeing it happen, bringing that back feels really important from the outside, but also went and worked at a different MLS club. So isn't just following what has happened in Toronto the last 6 years. Like, he's got other ideas that he has brought from other markets and sort of other projects to bring back in, it feels like, to be both an MLS aware club, but also have that global sort of appeal or global desire.
Yeah, 100%. The ambition is there from Robin Fraser. And the other thing I'll mention is, Toronto FC have they're going to be a different Toronto FC in the sense that they used to spend a lot of money on some older players, used to invest in, roster ready players, whereas a lot of the time some of the talent that came through their own backyard would slip through the cracks because they were focused on building an MLS ready team. Uh, some of the players that I've spoken to, some of the young players on Toronto FC and who are no longer with Toronto FC, have all pointed to Robin Fraser just unprompted about someone who has helped them in their career and someone has helped their development. And I think that part is really crucial, is that I think Toronto FC are going to pay more attention now in the ilk of maybe a different version of Dallas or a different version of Philadelphia, a team that tries to accomplish, both success on the field but also off the field in terms of development. And I think Robin Fraser's role in that is going to be very crucial as a guy who can, who's worked with a lot of young kids, can develop kids, but also a guy who's proven he can also do it in MLS and find success with the first team.
It is music to the ears of a lot of Toronto fans, if that's true. For anyone who doesn't know, I used to host a podcast called The Football Pod with Sean Kay and Devang Desai, who both used to work at Toronto FC and who are texting me consistently saying, why doesn't this young player play? And how good is this young player? And the answer a lot of times is just Toronto. Like, the at the U13 to U17 level, they're as good, if not better, than everyone else. And you look at the Canadian men's national team, and the players in Toronto are as good, if not better, than everyone else. But it has not worked at the first team level. That's that last piece. And as you said, Robin, very connected. I don't think it's, to be ignored that in the Mark Anthony Kaye trade, Ralph Priso was a part of the return. Like, he still had the idea of these young players I had seen in the Toronto setup that I have belief in, and it didn't work out. But at least there was still that idea from him from the outside of, like, I believe in the young talent in this market and I think they can make it through. And that would be great if that's the case going forward, because there's no reason it shouldn't be, and they shouldn't be in a conversation with some of the clubs you just mentioned who have done it in North America. Before we finish here and go into the signings, John Herdman, what's the deal with that? What is John Herdman's now TFC legacy? What's going on? What should we be following?
You know what? I'll say this. It actually was a very significant blow, I think, for Toronto FC to lose John Herdman. Say what you want about him now, based on the fact that, he got caught up in this spying scandal. drone gate, whatever it is you want to call it, he was starting to build something at Toronto FC, and he uh, got in my opinion, the most out of a roster that was subpar. And while things fizzled out down the stretch, I still think that there was a foundation that was being laid under John Herdman. Now, enter Robin Fraser, you got to start from scratch again.
Mm.
And not only do you lose a quality coach in John Herdman, not only do you lose a quality culture builder in John Herdman, you have to now you have to start a different ideology. You have to start a different way of playing, way of thinking, different roster to go with now Toronto FC's new philosophy. So in that part, I think it's a huge loss for Toronto FC. In terms of what's going on with John Herdman, to be honest, I do not know. CSA has said they're going to handle it internally, meaning they're privately going to handle the matter. Is he going to get in trouble? Is he not? Is there going to be some kind of penalty beared? We don't know. Whether or not CSA choose to make that public, I guess that's up to them. But as far as we know, he is no longer involved at the club, and obviously, and no longer involved in football right now in Canada.
It was a bizarre circumstance. It's one of the craziest stories I think I've ever covered. And then the fact that the women then went on with all the points deduction to make it out of the group, and like everything else that happened has been absolutely absurd. We interviewed Casey Stoney on this show, who has replaced Bev Priestman, who replaced John Herdman, and all of that. And I think more excitement there on the Canadian side. And you can go back and listen to that interview. But let's continue on here with Toronto FC. And so the offseason, the hope was that the outbound would be big. It was in the middle. They declined the options on a number of players, Prince being a big one of them, Shane O'Neill, Amy Mabika, Servania, Greg Ranjitsingh, all not major contributors, but around the team and probably the start of what needs to be filling out some players. They brought in Thiago Andrade to sell him, which does actually feel TFC-esque. That's like finding a Mark Delgado in a dispersal draft. That's like just playing the margins and picking up a couple extra $1,000 here or there. But the big one is the inability to get Lorenzo Insigne off the books. Tom has reported that they have, brought him multiple offers that he declined, in which he would get a lot of his contract in a payout and then the opportunity to go play in an Italy or Spain or Turkey or whatever that is. He has turned that down. He is on the books, as we have in our charts, all the way through the 2028 season at $15.4 million. And it didn't work. So he is still there, Michael, and it probably is worst case scenario to have tried to push him out and not successfully gotten him there.
Okay. So the 2028 is news to me.
Oh, maybe I'm reading wrong.
I think it's 2020, the halfway through 2026. So it's a year and a half.
Which is an option year. That would make sense.
Yeah.
And
so they have the option to extend it for an extra 6 months in the summer. But still, like it's a year and a half.
Won't happen. I guess.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Probably won't happen. No, but it's going to linger over this team like a dark cloud. It's going to be a saga, and the reality is when you see teams like, an Atlanta United, you see teams like even like Philadelphia, or you see teams like Austin, who are Cincinnati, Portland, name it. They're spending millions of dollars in transfer fees to bring in young players, to bring in designated players. The bar has risen in Major League Soccer. Toronto FC they're spending like those clubs. And the reason why they're still spending like those clubs is because they're paying Lorenzo Insigne still. So it's not like TFC aren't spending as much as those clubs when you see all those exciting transfers. It's just that they've already spent it. And I'm confident, again, they'll be a top 3, top 4, top 5 spending team in Major League Soccer because they still have Lorenzo Insigne and his astronomical contract on the books. So it's really hamstrung the team, and that's the big reason why, the way that this roster is constructed, it's tough to imagine unless everything goes right for this team and everything goes right that went wrong last year. It's tough to imagine this team being, anywhere close to a contender because they're built on the back of Lorenzo Insigne, who we don't even know if he's going to be playing this season.
Yeah.
We don't even know what's going on there. So it's tough. it's tough to imagine, anything positive coming from this.
So reading it from the outside, the phrase is, a partial buyout and then the ability to go play for another team. Each MLS team is allowed 2 full buyouts. And if you do that, the player doesn't really get to say yes or no. You have to pay the full contract and then they walk away. Should fans be asking why that's not happening? Or it wouldn't even matter because if they did that, they wouldn't go spend the money. So having him around is the same as not?
I think that's the gist of it. It's like, okay, you can pay the whatever the remaining 23-24 million dollars on the contract, which again, from financially, you got to weigh if that's even worth it for Toronto FC to fork up all of that money. And then you would have to go spend an additional $10 million or whatever it is to go bring in another designated player. So then you're asking for a $30+ million investment from Toronto FC. And let me remind you, this is a club who, over the past 5 years, has invested tens and tens of $1 million with no return. So why should now a board in MLSC be trusting Toronto FC to go spend that additional $10 million correctly? It's been kind of their crux, or the crutch for the last 3-4 years is, you've spent this money, we want results, the results aren't coming, we're not going to give you more money.
Yeah.
With Keith Pelly coming in, who is the new CEO of MLSC, it seems that he's found a way to be a little bit more willing to spend, but to what extent, I guess, is the big question.
Can you talk a little about his role sort of and how it connects to TFC? Because it feels like, at least from the outside, what I've seen is at least some quotes and comments. It felt like MLSC almost forgot. Bill Manning ran Toronto FC and like that was off here and it was successful and that made sense. And then when it wasn't really maybe as connected to the rest of it. Can you talk about maybe the change there and what now Toronto FC looks like inside of the MLSC family?
Sure. Listen, like, as a lot of people know or may not know, MLSC is one of the biggest sporting entities in the world, and they own some of the biggest, most valuable teams in the world, whether that be, the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Toronto Raptors. Toronto FC fall pretty far down that pecking order, especially when you consider where they are in the market of Toronto as well. You factor in, the Blue Jays there. There's a new WNBA team coming to Toronto. There's a lot to compete with in the city of Toronto. So while it has been a very valuable investment for MLSC, it's just not been a huge priority. And maybe that's a little bit unfair because MLSC is still spending, a ton of money. They're one of the top spenders in Major League Soccer every single year. However, it seems like there could have been a little bit more soccer experts at the top is the best way I'd say. And then, enter Keith Pelly. And Keith Pelly is a guy who, owns a club or is a partial owner of a club overseas. He's a guy who has a bit of a soccer background himself. And while his job is going to be enormous as MLSC CEO, meaning he's tasked with helping, the Toronto Maple Leafs get to that next level in the Stanley Cup playoffs or turning around the Raptors, he's been very much present so far at Toronto FC. So there is a bit of hope that with an owner or CEO, at least, of the company that owns Toronto FC, if they see the value in this investment, because I believe that Toronto FC has the potential to be a market-setting club in Major League Soccer, right? They're sure, look at Messi and Inter Miami. Before really Messi and Inter Miami, it was Toronto FC that was pushing boundaries, right? In the same way that LA Galaxy did. Yeah. So I think Toronto FC still has the potential to get back there. They just kind of have to hit that reset button, and I think Keith Pelly sees the value in that.
Even as you say, right, even where it's sat and what's happening, you mentioned Lorenzo Insigne's astronomical contract. Just for context for people, Messi, what we have reported is that his guaranteed compensation is $20 million. We have probably no idea how much money Messi's getting for his deal. That's fine. And for a bunch of these deals that are on the high end, it's a little bit harder because there's triggers and there's probably other stuff outside of contract that's involved. But Lorenzo Insigne's guaranteed compensation is $15.4 million. That is double anyone else in Major League Soccer. So everyone else we're talking about, and that will probably change this year with Latte Loth and Denke and Evander's new deal and all of that. But still, we are talking about players being paid around $6 to $8 million to be the biggest names on their team. Insigne being double that, and then Bernardeschi being inside of that. So like the spending is out there with the best in the league, with the biggest in the league. It's just been done poorly. And so now you're stuck into this spot. That means it's sort of been thin on the players coming in. We finally got a center forward move in Ola Brynjolfsson coming on loan from FC Midtjylland. A little bit of time with the national team, but a player who's still sort of looking to find his feet as a permanent starter. And then the other one, which I just learned that I've been saying wrong for years now, is Theo. I think it's Corbinu. Yep. I've been saying Corbino. I watched a video where he said it himself, and then he said, everyone just calls me Theo. And you're like, I can't really do that, but maybe one day. And he's on loan from Granada, and I think there's some excitement with that one of the type of Toronto player that should be around this team. And then one of D-Rose kids has signed as a homegrown goalkeeper. And then there's a few rumors still out there around this team. Michael, what do you make of the work they've done so far? And then we can talk about Zane Manoullis a little.
Yeah, for sure. Work they've done so far. I mean, Theo Corbinu is a fantastic sign. I think Jason Hernandez is, who, by the way, I believe is super widely respected in Major League Soccer. I think he is very forward thinking and innovative when it comes to these signings. And if you look at the last year and a half since he's taken charge, there haven't been really a lot of misses when it comes to Toronto FC's signings. So I think they're in good hands. They're moving forward. So, in Theo Corbinu, what they do is they loan with a purchase option. They get a, hungry Canadian international, or like a Canadian national who's been ousted from the national team. And I'm sure he has aspirations of cracking, that roster again. A guy who I've spoken to, like I said, a lot of young kids. I always ask about, Jaquil Marcheretti and how highly touted he was. I always ask, is he the best kid that you guys have seen growing up? Resoundingly, it's always been Theo Corbinu, because he came through the Toronto FC Academy before heading overseas. I think he is going to be one of the surprises in Major League Soccer this season. I think the talent is there. I think he has a potential to be a game changer, and I think he has been kind of overshadowed just from not being part of the national team and not getting consistent minutes at very high level clubs. But the talent, I think, is there, and he's going to get ample opportunity, especially with Lorenzo Insigne sitting out. In terms of Ula, which is kind of what I like to call him.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Listen, like nobody heard of this guy before it was reported, and I don't really know what to make of it. The one thing I can tell people is, he's more of a well-rounded number 9, doesn't do one thing particularly great, but does a lot of, things well. They need a number 9 for years. They need a number 9 for years. Is he the answer? I guess we'll see once the season starts. But if that's it, I mean, nowhere near enough. Like I said, the roster turnover hasn't been enough for fans to feel like this is a new era, a page turning. Doesn't feel like a fresh roster. It feels like a continuation of last year with a new head coach, which is not enough. But I say that in, it's February 19th while we're recording this. A lot can change in
for sure
the next week or two.
It's changed already. If we had done this last week when I've done some of these other teams, it would have been basically 0 signings. It would have just been Corbinu. So it's already changed pretty quickly. I love that you keyed in on him and what he can bring, because I may have told this story on the show, but I was at the media marketing tour and Jonathan Osorio came in and sat on the dais and looked kind of defeated and like asking questions about the season and what's gone on and the team. And then it was right when Tom had first reported Theo and his potential addition. And I brought it up and said it like, sort of, you don't have to confirm anything, but like in abstract, what would it be like? And his face lit up of like, that's the type of player Toronto should be bringing in. That's the type of player I want to play with. And that's a guy, like you said, who watched him come through the academy and then has played with him at the national team. So he knows what it takes to play in this league. He knows what he's capable of. And I think there should be excitement about what he can bring. And then you start to say, like, if Bernardeschi is healthy and plays and gives you something, like, now that's 2 wingers, that is now an outlet to at least play through. And that's sort of a strength for this team. And then the other moves we're sort of waiting on to see. Talk me through for a moment, Zane Monloose, or whatever it is, who's an Arsenal U21, and the idea right now we think is coming on loan. Just the idea of it's a very odd addition in Major League Soccer. We haven't really seen moves like this, and at a center back position that needs top end talent, but does have some level of depth. It feels like if that's what he's being brought in for.
Yeah, I mean, right away, the first thing that came to mind was Nixon Gomes, and he's a player that played for Sheffield's U21s. Again, a player who was struggling to break through with that team, and he came over last year and joined Toronto. Very cheap wages. Right. He was one of, if not their best center back last season. I think the quality of Toronto's back line, it allows for a lot of opportunities for these young players to come over and to get consistent minutes and to be, surprises at time. I don't know what the gap is between a Premier League 2 player and a Major League Soccer. Especially with defenders. Defenders are so tough to judge. What I'll say is I don't think I've ever seen a young Toronto FC academy product yet break through as a defender in Major League Soccer. So why not go out and, listen, Arsenal's not the worst place to poach academy players from. No. Why not go out and poach their captain? And I think, sure, you attach the name Arsenal to it, it gets fans excited. Temper expectations a little bit. It probably has a lot of, developing still to do. It's probably pretty raw. At the same time, sometimes that works in Major League Soccer. So it's I think it's exciting, especially when you consider he's 21 and who knows what can happen the next 2-3 years.
One of the things that popped in my head too when this came across, and I don't know anything about this, I just made it up, is Robin Fraser was coach of Colorado Rapids, who are owned by the same sporting group, Kroenke, as Arsenal. I do wonder if he's had the chance to see him maybe in trainings or behind closed doors in which he has more knowledge about this player. And as you said, what's the jump? How does a player like this fit? All of that. And if it's on loan, it may not even be a permanent thing. It might just be a shot in the dark at trying to get some cheap talent in the door and make your team a little bit deeper and a little bit more competitive. Let's go to our Doyleism now, and then we'll jump off the back of that.
TFC have made some late additions to their roster, a Norwegian center forward, a young English center back, and that's kind of fun. But if you look at the thing as a whole, this looks much more about getting themselves set up for 2026 and beyond. And just about everybody comes off the books after this year, except Federico Bernardeschi, Jonathan Osorio, I think Richie Larea as well. And that's just about it. Like everyone else who's under contract through 2026 is on a minimum salary. And it's kind of the end point of a disastrous 4 or 5 year stretch for this team. And there's no bigger symbol of that than Lorenzo Insigne, who, as per Tom's reporting, Toronto tried to move heaven and earth to get this guy off the roster this year, and he just decided he didn't want to. He's just going to collect a paycheck, and it seems unlikely he'll, spend more than 1,500 minutes playing soccer. Very good work if you could get it. But the dude is just a karma sink, right? It just ruins the vibes, and it doesn't lead to good soccer, and there's not enough talent elsewhere to make up for that. So I picked this team to win, quote unquote, win the wooden spoon in preseason. And even with these late moves, I haven't seen anything to suggest that I'm going to be too far off in that prediction. So good luck to Robin Fraser, and good luck TFC fans trying to endure the season ahead.
It's always happy fun time with Matt Doyle, as we know. It's hard to avoid. I'm actually going to mix this with our over-under line from Andrew Wiebe, which is 33.5 points for the season. The question being then, are we buying what Doyle's saying? Doyle is saying a wooden spoon. Last year, the wooden spoon was a deep, deep hole. San Jose finished on 21 points. Second to last in the West was Kansas City on 31. In the East, Chicago finished at the bottom with 30, New England on 31, and then Nashville was on 36, right behind Toronto FC, who finished on 37 points. So do you think, like Doyle said, this team takes a step back from last year, at least for now? And do you think that that's at the bottom of the league?
Yeah, there was a lot of points left on the table last year, I'll say. Do I think they take a step back? They're probably around the same
Yeah.
spot that they were last season. Lorenzo Insigne barely played with Toronto FC last year, so I don't really factor him as being much of a loss. He probably won them 6 points throughout the season, but I think that can be probably made up by having a proper number 9, can probably be made up by having Theo Corbinu, which we talked about. For me, I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, so these things always kill me, but I would take the over, but probably slightly is where I'm leaning right now. So
Yeah.
34, 35 points. But it's gonna be close.
Yeah.
It's gonna be close.
It is it's tough that the line's even here, and as Doyle said, the hope is that this is the last year of the case. I'm on one side of me says the talent's not there, it's a bit of an unknown. I don't know how much, you'll get throughout the season if Insigne is around and Bernadette's committed or not committed and what's going on. The other side of things is Robin Fraser, part of the reason he's no longer in Colorado is he really wanted to play a heavy possession style that was, open and expansive. And what we have seen from, at a minimum, Wilfred Nancy is like soccer players want to play in that. And so you look at a group of players who have struggled, I think, over the last few years, and I think they're going to enjoy being a part of this. There are growing pains in all of that, and there is a talent ceiling on the full group. There's obviously elite talent, but overall on the full group here, and they're going to bump up against that. But I think it's going to be slightly over as well, close to what it was last year, because I think in the dog days of the summer, they're going to go out there and they're going to ball and they're going to play, and kids are going to play with confidence, and there are going to be teams who are less focused and less locked in. You're also going to, your hope would be similar to last year with Herdman, steal some early points because teams don't know what you look like yet and what to expect. So if that all sort of rolls together, they're probably in a similar situation. I think for TFC fans, if it was fun to watch, even if it wasn't successful, with the contracts coming off the books, that'd probably be a pretty positive year. The other thing to note, which I forgot to add already, is for Toronto this year, only Canadian Championship Cup competition. They did not qualify for Leagues Cup or CONCACAF Champions Cup. They drew Montreal in the first round, which is bizarre. And I know on the Montreal side of things, they were pretty excited about it. And Vancouver is on the other side of the bracket. So it would only be a meeting in the final with the defending champion. That could be an avenue as well to have a little success and try and reboot some stuff. You would play the winner of Forge and Halifax in the next round if you're able to get by Montreal. That's probably something that Toronto will focus on, but maybe that's a positive. Maybe getting results in something like that and going on a run sort of boost the team into the regular season. Either way, we are here at SoccerWise for all of your therapy needs or anything else Toronto FC fans. We want Toronto to succeed. We love the team. We love the market. We love the fan base. And hopefully Michael will do this again next year, and it'll be happy-go-lucky again. And we'll be talking about the next big superstar and all the great things that are going to happen in Canada.
I can't wait. I'm looking ahead for a year and a half. I can't wait.